Okay, it looks like we are ready to go. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'll remind everyone to please disclose of any pecuniary interest at the appropriate time. And I apologize to those of you who are tuning in online, but we're graced with the presence of Chief Jason Henry from Kettle and Stony Point First Nations this evening. He was here to help us unveil the land acknowledgement plaque that we have now in our council chambers. And we did that today in acknowledgement of the National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is tomorrow, June 21st. And I will read the acknowledgement tonight. We acknowledge that the Township of Warwick is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, as well as the many Indigenous nations in Ontario whose footsteps have marked them for centuries. We also wish to acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 29 and Treaty 25 territories signed by Chippewa chiefs and offer our respect and gratitude for these lands. Warwick Township Council and staff will strive to educate residents about our history through programming and events. We pledge to our First Nations neighbors that we will not tolerate systemic racism and commit to advancing reconciliation by building trusting relationships and fostering ideas for future consultation and partnership opportunities. And we will go to the minutes of the previous council meeting of May 30th. Programming and event 2022. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file those minutes. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor White. Any questions or comments on those minutes? All in favor of receiving and filing those? That is carried. And we will go to scheduled meetings and events. Any questions or comments, errors or omissions on those? Seeing none, we will go to councillors' commitments and items. Do we have anything to add to councillors' commitments? Councillor White.
We'll just have to adjust the dates on Monday, July 25th. That's August.
Councillor Mitchell.
The last week of August, I'll be unavailable.
Okay. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, the only question I have is the August 8th meeting we're scheduled for. Two councillors will be away. Will we have enough for a quorum?
So Councillor Mitchell will be here. Councillor Westgate, you will be here?
Yeah.
Yes, so we will have quorum for that meeting. So
Okay.
if there's any difficulties, then we'll make sure that we let staff know well in advance. Anything else that we want to add to councillors' commitments? All right, we will go to councillors' items. I'm going to start on my right side here today. Councillor Mitchell, do you have anything for council?
Nothing for me, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
White?
Nothing for me.
Councillor Morris?
I have nothing either.
And Councillor Westgate?
And I have nothing.
Nothing. All right. Well, that's always a good thing. We want to make sure everything's running along smoothly. Just wanted to thank the Mike Harvey Foundation. They ran a great barbecue, giving out free hamburgers a couple of weekends ago. So that was great. And raising awareness for their foundation. And trying to think if there was anything else. I think we're good. So I will go to staff items. 9A, we are going to get a verbal update from Amanda Gubbles to confirm delegation requests for AMO.
Thank you, Mayor Rumbouts. So I have been tracking the request from council over the last few months in order to request delegations for the AMO conference. And I have listed on the agenda 4 specific issues and ministries that we're looking to schedule delegations with. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to confirm with council that these were the topics and ministries and request if there were any additional. The deadline to apply is June 24th, so we'll be completing that just early this week. All right, hearing none, we'll proceed then. Thanks.
Perfect. We look forward to meeting with the new ministry of the province then. And we will go to accounts and the GL report. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file that. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Westgate. Any questions or comments? Anything our treasurer would like to highlight?
Pretty clean this month.
Great. All in favor of receiving and filing that? That is carried. We'll go on to non-action correspondence. Is there anything anyone wants to highlight from that extensive list? Councillor Morris.
Yeah, the only one that caught my interest was 0609 about the retirement home funding. There's some of it I totally agree with, some of them I kind of agree with, but I do think the nursing and the PSW staff need more support. I'd like to support that resolution.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell? Questions or comments on that? All in favor of supporting that motion then? That is carried. Thank you. Anything else anyone wants to highlight? All right, then we need a motion to receive and file the remainder of the correspondence. Thank you, Councillor Morris and Councillor Mitchell. All in favor? That is carried. We'll go to action correspondence. We have one correspondence request. How does council want to deal with the correspondence? Councillor Mitchell?
I'd like to support this one in some capacity at least.
Do you have a dollar figure in mind?
Up for discussion. Sponsoring home looks like it's achievable for us possibly, but I'm welcome to a conversation.
I agree with Councillor Mitchell. I think we should support it, like the $100 for one sign saying the Township of Warwick is pretty reasonable, I think.
So we're looking at $100. I believe it's, yeah, that's correct. All right. And so we have a mover and a seconder. Questions or comments? All in favor? That is carried. We don't need a motion to receive and file anything then if we dealt with that?
No.
All right. We will go on to staff reports. The first one is on council remuneration, and staff has given a recommendation. How does council want to deal with that? Councillor Morris?
I just have a question. Is this effective July 1st or November 15th?
November 15th for the new term of council.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with this term of council. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Westgate, you look like you have a question.
For the Committee of Adjustment, I didn't quite understand that. Right now, we just get paid for one meeting, paid for each one, no?
For each application.
For each application? Oh, well, then that should change.
Yes, I believe the report is saying for each meeting as opposed to each application.
Okay.
Do we pay counselors that same way per meeting? I think we pay counselors perhaps the regular per meeting per diem. So that's why you would think that. I think Councillor Westgate, for our public 3 members on Committee of Adjustment, we have a historical practice of paying them the per diem per application. And it used to be based on site visits and the work involved in a single application. But we've seen, as you know, an increase in the volume of applications and the time of the meetings have become, I think, more efficient than they used to be also. So that's why I think our treasurer has suggested per meeting, regardless of whether it's one application or say 4, if we deal with that one meeting.
Yes, because we've done as many as 5 in one meeting, and some of them are just in and out. But you do have the odd one that about 1 or 2 a year that might take longer and they have to go out and look at, but I think probably we should change it anyway.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendation from staff.
Okay, do we have a seconder to that? Councillor White? Any other discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And we will move on to the Zion line reconstruction. We need a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Westgate, questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And there's the municipal drainage assessment payment policy. There's a recommendation from staff on that as well. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that to have it on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Morris and Councillor Mitchell. Questions or comments on that? All in favor? That is carried. And the site plan delegation mandatory in Bill 109. There is a recommendation there as well.
Candace also here to speak to it.
Okay, yep. Let's get a mover and a seconder, and then we'll maybe have Ken speak to that. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor White. Mr. Manager, welcome. I'm going to give the floor to you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Kenneth Watson from the County of Lambton. I'm joined tonight by the planning team. So Luis Estevez is behind me. Karen Sander, who is the other planner, is joining us online. I'll keep this brief. As you know, the ongoing saga of Planning Act changes. We've had quite a few this year. So we started out with a sort of hint from the province that perhaps you could delegate, and that was optional. And now they've decided not to really give any municipalities any choice. So now under Bill 109, which was given royal assent prior to the election, you are required, this is mandatory. All municipalities that don't have this delegation must invoke it to staff. Now that said, what we've recommended to you is a delegation of the site plan decision and the agreement, because we felt it was important to keep it as one package of process. So if you recall, when we bring stuff before you, oddly enough, a little bit later in your agenda, you have a great example. You have the site plan and agreement as one piece. We're recommending you delegate it as one piece. We have not heard back from the province any confirmation about the requirement to delegate the agreement. So you could, that's the one piece of this that you still have an option to, but we're recommending you still delegate it entirely, because I'm waiting for the province to come back and say, no, it was the whole thing. Regardless, if you take that out, we will come back and make those changes. But unfortunately, the first part, you don't really have any choice on, which is not exactly my favorite kind of news to be bringing you, but unfortunately we're here. I would say though, just to give you some comfort, one of our colleagues with the Plimpton, Wyoming planning team has been leading the way, Maria Casarosi. I give her total kudos for leading the way on everything. And most of our member municipalities have now invoked some form of delegation. And even before we were in this position, 2/3 of municipalities in Ontario had delegated in some fashion. So there weren't that many to play catch up. My last conversation with the province is that we are batting way ahead of many of our other county colleagues nearby. So that is good news. I hope that answers your any potential questions, and I'm happy to take any further ones.
Okay, I'll open the floor to council. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Manager? Councillor Morris.
I don't really have a question, but I do have a comment. I really am not happy with the province taking away rights of elected officials from the smaller ridings. It appears we have no choice, but I don't think it's right. I think the elected officials still should have some say in this.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Councillor Westgate?
I do agree with Wayne a little bit.
So through your worship to you, Councillor Westgate, there's a couple things here. One, it's always important to remember that municipalities, including the county, are creatures of the province. So municipalities don't exist in law unless the province establishes you in law, which gives them pretty much all of the cards to dictate how you operate. So unfortunately, that's where this decision-making lies. That said, the site planning process, if you go to attachment 3 of the report, we have this triangle that is sort of the spectrum of planning. And you'll notice the triangle is pointing downward because the level of public engagement that you are required to do under the Planning Act for a site plan is none. So you start out with the base requirement of none. The public has no appeal rights. You're not required to do any public meetings. That said, if you do any, that's, you can't have less than one in this case. You're doing more than the minimum. Under the process, the only bodies that have the ability to appeal a site plan beyond sort of the utilities and the minister is the municipality itself and the applicant. So one of the things that will not change in this process is how staff review site plan approvals. So the planning team will continue to work with your municipal staff and your engineering consultant, Spreet, and we'll continue to review things in terms of how we've been doing it today. The only thing that will change is instead of a report coming before you that lays out why the site plan should be approved and the agreement, assuming you delegate that, we'll actually be doing the same report or a form of that to the signing authority, who we've suggested is the CAO, and I think the treasurer as alternate. So that's the only difference. So nothing changes. In the rare circumstance, and we note this in the report, where there is a disagreement, the municipality can appeal. You'd be in the very odd position you'd be appealing yourselves, because once it's delegated, it's being delegated to your staff in the town. It's not being delegated to county staff, because we are not technically employees of the township and we can't bind you to conditions, hence why it's your own staff. So you'd be in the unusual position of appealing yourselves. I don't think we've ever seen something like that happen at the OLT, but I couldn't tell you how it would work, but in the case of a situation where, say, the planning recommendation was not followed, then you would have to make some decisions about how you defend if there was an appeal, because under the process, our planners would be summoned to be friends of the tribunal to present our position, which was not what you decided. But I think that's one of these rare 1 in a million circumstances. I don't think we've rarely seen that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that helps answer it. So I guess the only say we have is through our staff and our direction to the staff.
So through you to Councillor Westgate, sorry, I'm mindful of the time because I have to go and do this all over again for Enniskillen via phone. One of the things that has been suggested by one of the other partner municipalities, because there's a recognition that their council members wanted to at least know that a site plan was coming in, was to treat council members in much the same way as any of the circulation bodies that we circulate a site plan to. So that's one option that we've kind of embedded in the process following that conversation, is if there's a desire that council be circulated, we could build that into the process, and you would simply be treated like Bell and TELUS and all the utility companies that get circulated, and you get an FYI to say, hey, this site plan has come in. Now keep in mind, through that process, we're not obligated to agree with your comments, but you would at least have a chance to do that. And I'll say that we're kind of borrowing a process from a previous career that I had out west that works and actually embeds council members in the circulation process. So it's not terribly difficult to do if council wants to do that.
Is that something we would decide on tonight then, Ken?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't think we would need a motion. We would just operationalize it.
Is council good with that then? I think that makes sense.
If that's okay. I don't want to speak on behalf of the township, obviously.
Yep, please.
Thanks, Mayor Rumboats. So great suggestion, Ken. And not specifically related just to site plans, but related to the process you're asking about, Councillor Westgate. We have, as a municipality, just recently finished a process review exercise with planning. So as you recall, one of our deliverables in the strategic plan is to review all of our planning processes and document them for efficiencies and, providing better guides to the public. So we've just walked through those processes, and you'll be seeing that coming back to council soon. One of the deliverables out of that review was to update the reporting that we're doing with council on all of our planning files. So you'll remember right now we provide the dashboard. It's typically in camera. So we will look at refreshing that as we move forward with our updated streamlined processes, and it will include more of a regular update on site plan applications. So that's one way already you can know that you will be made aware of all the site plan applications that we receive, and then all of our planning files. And as Ken suggested, if council wishes to be included on circulations, we're happy to do that as well.
My comment back to Ms. Gubbles today was, as soon as we get through the traveling roadshow of Bill 109, we'll be actually going back to ground proof all of the work that we did, because we need to go through it and make sure that the timelines that we've established are actually workable. But I know that Ms. Sander has done a really great job on the site plan process. I think that's mostly been ironed out. So I think we're in a good position.
That is great to hear. We want to keep our site plan processes streamlined as possible and make it as welcoming as possible for new development to come into Warwick Township. So that is fantastic. All right. Anything else on this? All in favor of receiving and filing that? That is carried. Thank you so much, Mr. Manager, for coming. And as you said, you have another meeting to attend, so we'll let you go. And we will move on to the Win This Space Fund reallocation. We need a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor White and Councillor Mitchell. And any questions or comments on that? I just wanted to take a moment to thank our treasurer, Mr. Jarrett, who I believe came forward with this idea, and I thought it was fantastic. I know Ms. Gubbles thought it was fantastic, but how do you make it work? And you absolutely did. It's going to bring some new cuisine into Watford, which I'm sure that our community will be very excited for once this catches on. So I think this is great. And I believe we've already had interest from restaurants that are interested in this, have we not?
We've been very fortunate. We've approached 4 restaurants and we've got 6 requested dates so far. And we're trying just to have 6 dates throughout the balance of the year. So we're trying to fiddle around and make it work. And we still have a couple of other options. We're going to actually go meet tomorrow and hone up the schedule thereafter.
Good problems to have. That's great. And it's always good to partner with our local Legion as well. So I'm sure that they'll be excited about this as well. So all in favor of that recommendation? That is carried. And we'll go on to the Watford 150 anniversary seed money. There's a recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor White and Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris and I were at the meeting. Oh, and thank you, Councillor Mitchell. It's going to be very exciting, I think. Staff has been working incredibly hard at this so far. I was so almost blown away at how exciting this event is going to be. And I think it's going to be fantastic for all of Watford to be able to participate in that. Questions or comments on that? All in favor? That is carried. And we will go to the site plan agreement for 2407199 Ontario Inc. Planners Report. And I will give it over to Louis.
Your Worship, Council, Louis Estevez with the County of Lambton. I'll keep this short and brief, respecting your time. We're here before you regarding a site plan application for 7140 Egremont Road. I'm not sure if Council recalls, but there was a rezoning application earlier this year in relation to a campground. So this is the final step in that process of legitimizing the campground on the property. The site plan itself identifies 15 campground sites or campsites, in which essentially a trailer, what have you, would be there, and it would also accommodate another vehicle's parking, so you'd have enough space for that. The site is unserviced, so no water provision, no sanitary services, garbage is hauled away, so it's what you bring in is what you take out. And so that was very much the structure of the agreement, and that's the way it was tailored. The intent being to preserve the wetland on site. And so this is very much in alignment with the environmental impact study that was prepared as part of the rezoning application. There is a small deposit as part of the agreement. Total work's about $12,000, so a $6,000 deposit, just because there's not a lot of work being done to the site. Internally, we were circulated to the Director of Public Works for input, Fire Chief, and myself. It didn't go to SPREET because there was no works being done. So we've kept that done internally, and essentially the agreement was reviewed by the applicant. He's in agreement with doesn't particularly like one of the conditions or two, but he's satisfied with it moving forward. The issue at hand with the applicant is that he would like to have potable water on site. Unfortunately, the rezoning is very clear. It's an unserviced campground. So should council have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, any questions today? Seeing none, there is a recommendation there. Councillor Westgate.
When they came to us, I thought it was only 5 or 6 sites, and now we have quite a few more.
Through your worship, to Councillor Westgate, I can't speak to the initial coming to council as I wasn't here, but from all that I've seen throughout the rezoning and through this process was a more intensive park space. And I think part of that is to help offset some of the costs in operating the campground.
Okay, any other questions? There is a recommendation there. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Westgate, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
And we will go on to the ELCC construction and project update. There's a recommendation to approve the report as presented. We need a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor White and Councillor Mitchell. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Morris.
I just wanted Ryan to give us update on the colors. I don't know if I missed that in the presentation or not. It looks pretty bad right now. I know that.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. You're referring to the interior painting colors or the exterior? Yes, the exterior painting of the existing arena facility will match the color scheme of the new community complex, which is your standard charcoal brick color and grays.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know a lot of people in the community that are excited to hear that. So, any other questions? All right, we need a mover and a seconder to, did we already do that? No, thank you. Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Morris. All in favor? That is carried. And we have, in relation to that, the Watford Arena Exterior Painting RFQ Award. Oh, did I miss? Oh, thank you. Parks Capital Project Update. And we need a mover and a seconder to approve that. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Morris. Questions on that update? All in favor? That is carried. We'll go on to now the Watford Arena Exterior Painting RFQ Award. Councillor Mitchell and Councillor White, questions or comments? No, maybe a verbal explanation as to why staff chose to choose the project or the company they did.
Thank you, Mayor Romboats. We went with the company as recommended in this report. We did have one that was considerably lower price, but we did question whether or not that scope was maybe missed, and that's why the number came in so low. I think the one we had chosen is in line and in scope, and I think will meet the expectations of the tender.
That's great. Thank you. All in favor of that? That is carried. And the Watford Arena Workshop Edition RFQ award. So there is a recommendation attached to that report. Councillor Morris, you're not moving it? Okay. Do we have a mover and a seconder just to have it on the floor? Councillor Westgate and Councillor Mitchell. Comments? Councillor Morris.
I am not in favor of spending over $700,000 for a workshop. I can see no reason why we can't get a local contractor to build us a shop, because I know you can build a lot cheaper than that. You could build a fully insulated, heated drive shed type shop for under 200,000, I bet you. I'd like us to rethink this.
Okay, any other comments? Ms. Goebbels.
Thanks, Councillor Morris. I do just want to point out, so Ryan actually prepared this report, so thank you for that. We did receive 3 bids on the scope of work, which included not only the workshop, which we initially budgeted for $300,000, it also did include some significant stormwater related work that was unbudgeted, and it is required and found to be required as a result of the site work at the ELCC site. So I want to point out that some of the additional cost on the stormwater work was not initially scoped in project and isn't directly related to the workshop itself, but is required to support the ELCC project. In addition, there will be some cost savings realized because some of that cost will be removed from the ELCC project and reallocated here, if that makes sense. Same as the portion with the garbage enclosure. The workshop itself, as you know, is outlined in our service delivery review report, and it did come in on budget, I believe, in this bid at $579,000, and we had budgeted $300,000. So with the construction price increases, those were the market prices we received back. I guess I just wanted to point out the difference between the workshop scope and the overall project scope. I don't know if Ryan or Trevor have anything they want to add related to either operational need of the workshop or the financing of the recommendation here.
First, we'll hear from Councillor White.
Just a question on the stormwater management. What does that entail? Is it changes to that parking lot? Is it hard, like a different surface, that type of thing? Just question. Yeah.
Great question, Councillor White. So what it will entail is connecting the stormwater that deals with the former Ball Diamond and that whole parking lot area from the new parking lot at the rear of the ELCC, kind of by the concession booth. It'll create a drainage connection from there all the way through the back of the arena along the east side and into the north of the parking lot. It will reroute and upsize the stormwater drain through the north parking lot, as well as set up the area for future paving. So it will not necessarily install all of the culverts that would be needed in the north parking lot for paving, but it will kind of create the areas for the connections. The reasons why all the culverts won't be installed in the north parking lot is because we're not doing a full regrading as part of the scope of work. So we can't install the catch basins if they're not like at the appropriate height, but it'll lay the groundwork to make future paving of that area more feasible and easier in the future.
Great, thank you.
Ryan, do you want to add to that?
No, I think Amanda did a pretty good job clarifying that. But yeah, just to make the point that the arena workshop itself is $579,500. The sewer work was $120,000, and the optional garbage enclosure was $29,000.
Councillor Morris?
I'm still not comfortable with $580,000 for a workshop. It's $250,000 over what we budgeted. And we're spending a lot of money as it is. I just can't put myself to agree to spend that kind of money on a workshop.
Councillor Westgate.
I guess we do need a workshop of some kind back there. We need to clean up that corner a little bit. This, it's probably a more expensive building than what you'd build on a farm, and we want it to fit in with the arena. You need to have the block, steel structure, and it'll have a sprinkler system in it too. I would imagine it's going to have to. It's connected to the arena. So it's going to be quite a bit more expensive than a building you'd build at home on your farm or your shed. Whether it's that much more expensive or not, I guess it probably is. A commercial building is quite a bit more than a farm building.
Councillor Morris.
What are our options? It doesn't have to be added to the arena. It's never been there before. What are our options of building another vehicle? Why does it have to be commercial? If it's not connected to the arena, why would it need fire sprinkler systems? I just think we're building a Cadillac and we've already spent a pile of money, and I just don't like spending this much more.
Thank you. Trevor?
I'm of two minds. The treasurer in me says no. However, the business person says you're not going to get it cheaper or in a better location. If we were to acquire the land to build a more reasonable amount or a more reasonable building would be any further ahead. The one thing I did look at today, and I actually sought out the auditors for clarification, is we have presently 3.6 million unencumbered reserves, which can go to any project you want. This year, we are expecting a deficit of roughly $200,000. That is a on paper deficit because what's happened is at the end of the year, we had 4.8 in expenditures for the hall, for which we've only drawn $3 million of our loan. So once you net that out, we actually have another 1.6 in unencumbered reserves. So given that, and there's 5.2 in unencumbered reserves, the question then comes down to, is it the right location? Are we going to be able to build it cheaper in the future? And what does it do operationally if we don't build it today? Because we know that the facility at the Watford shop is a little bit overrun right now with everything. And that's why I don't get paid to make these decisions.
Can I speak to Councillor Morris's question? Yes, we'll have Amanda speak and then Councillor White.
Sorry, I didn't see you guys before me. A great question, though, Councillor Morris, about why does it have to be here and why can't it be somewhere else? And I think if you recall, we did do what we called a long-term facility needs assessment, which is a long exercise. At the end of the day, it took longer than we thought, but to review our overall facility needs and where was kind of the best use and where were the needs. And through both the service delivery review and that exercise, it was recommended that an addition to the Watford Arena was the most advantageous and strategic place to make this workshop addition, both for operational reasons for the arena, to support even the ELCC, so for making sure we can support the addition and the operations in that addition, as well as our equipment over space needs from the Watford shop. And through that exercise, we did also look at, as you know, the Watford shop and its uses and our ability to look at that facility or realign it to another one, or, all the options. And it was recommended in both of those to move forward here. Of course, those were led by external consultants, but the results did come back to council and were endorsed. And I think that's partly why we've continued to scope this project for this tender and put it out under the same umbrella as an addition workshop to the arena. And it was for those operational advantages found through those third-party consultants. So I guess that's why it was looked at only in this model.
Councillor White.
Just a question on operational savings, because over time, those can be quite a bit more substantial than the difference in the budgeted costs. Would they not be?
Well, potentially, right? And neither of our third-party studies, though, quantified the savings, right? They identified ways in which efficiencies would be gained. Certainly, even, I know it's so short, the Watford Shop's a stone's throw from the arena, but that distance would be mitigated. Everything would be stored on site. And then let's not also forget that the Watford Shops used to complement the public works needs and operations, and them having more ability to store and organize the Watford Shop in the way that they need to maximize their efficiency is also an advantage. But while I suspect that may be true, Councillor White, we did not quantify it through either study.
Okay, any other comments? We all know inflation is happening here in Canada, and I don't have a crystal ball, but if I did, I think it would tell us that this isn't going to get any less expensive going forward. But how does council want to deal with this? We have a recommendation and we have a motion. I guess I'll just ask, unless there's any other questions or comments. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We will go down to the committee in other minutes. So the minutes of the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting of April 27th. And can we combine those maybe to June 8th? We need a mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Morris and Councillor White. Any comments on that, Chair White? All right, all in favor of receiving, filing those? Thank you. That is carried. And new business, we have the Blue Water Power Shareholders Annual General Meeting, and there's a written resolution approval there. We need a mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Morris and Councillor Mitchell. Just to let council know, I did attend that meeting along with Ms. Gubbles, and it's very impressive what Blue Water Power is doing on our behalf. So we were glad to see that they're still making a profit and doing a great job servicing this area. All in favor of that? That is carried. Thank you. And we will now go into the closed meeting session. We need a mover and a seconder to go in camera for the reasons listed on the agenda. Thank you, Councillor White and Councillor Mitchell. Just for those of you who are watching online, we will be returning into open session, but we will not be returning to the YouTube channel, as we will just be closing out the meeting and doing bylaws. So wish you all a good couple of weeks and a safe and happy summer. And we'll give all in favor of moving in camera. That is carried. Just about missed that. We'll give our staff a minute or two to